Okay, well, good evening. It's now 7 p.m. or for me, for my 30 years in the Navy, 1900. We'll call the SELCO meeting for September 23rd open. First off, I'd like to welcome all you folks to our meeting. You are combined over the past 40 or 50 years of having meetings. You've exceeded the sum total of the number of people we've ever had at a meeting. Is there one time?
Yes. When on cable they wanted the Asian channel.
Oh, okay.
And then we had a show of force.
So it's and we got the Asian channel on board.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that
they came in and said, "Look at all this. We want it. You got it."
Okay. Well, other than that, so welcome. Tonight, we have an agenda that will stay pretty close to. The first order of business is, because it's the start of our year, is that we'll have an election of officers for the SELCO Commission. I'm going to try to. Mike's coming.
Yeah, he is.
Okay. So I will defer that, and I think we'll put that aside. And the next thing on the agenda is your presentation. So why don't we do that? Because this young lady may last, but I'm not sure the little one will. So I'll turn this over to you. It's your floor. Oh, by the way, there is a reminder, this is not an open hearing. This is a presentation, and if we've avoided some questions or some banter that comes about, that's fine. We're pretty cordial about it. We're not going to spank you for anything. You know, if you want to ask something, but the bottom line is it's not an open hearing. Thank you.
Great. All right, well, thank you very much to the SELCO Commission for allowing us to come present information on EMFs and how the risks and concerns that some citizens have around some of the efforts that align with that. Namely, there's the 5G rollout, small cell infrastructure, which has been on the SELCO committee minutes, where you're discussing the permitting process for that now. So that's a relevant topic. And then there's also the smart meter, $3.4 million smart meter replacement project. And that's also a concern to many about having smart meters, so we'll talk about that. And then there's also, I had on that third just about wireless in general. I know SELCO has a Wi-Fi service that they're rolling out to all customers, so this is relevant to that as well. I have myself and Cece here tonight. I'll let her introduce herself once I'm done, just kind of introducing the topic. So just first, a little bit of intro on the 5G topic. 5G is the next generation of cell phone infrastructure, yet it's categorically different than its predecessors. So everybody's used to having 4G, starting on the 3G, but it's not as simple. It creates a major increase in change in the type of wireless radiation to which we're all being exposed without consent, whether we use the service or not. 5G builds on existing infrastructure and in addition uses extremely high millimeter wave frequencies of 24 gigahertz or more. These 5G signals don't travel far, so antennas will be installed approximately every 2 to 10 homes in residential neighborhoods. And 5G will increase our wireless radio frequency radiation exposure on a 24/7, 365-day basis. And I kind of wanted to get in because that is a question around maybe every 2 to 10 homes. So it's really about, now you see cell towers, could be a mile away, or you barely see them. Maybe you see them in a soccer field or at some other destination. But if what they're planning on for this is something these can't travel that far, so there'll be more of them, a lot more of them. And the 2 to 10 homes, that kind of comes from many sources, but one was the Texas Wireless Summit in 2016, where AT&T outlined a vision for 5G networks. And Mr. Gosh, who was the director of wireless communications at AT&T Labs, said that it's plentiful, but it's difficult to use the 5G wavelength. He said that due to noise limitations, power amplifiers are less efficient in millimeter wave networks than any in the lower bands. And the solution, he said, is to place cell sites very close together. How close together? If you want to use them and deliver 100 megabits per second, you have to have the sites like 200 meters apart maximum, 100 meters for autonomous vehicles. So they were in Texas, so they said a city block in Austin is 200 to 250 meters. So you're talking about several small cells deployed every block to support this 100 megabits per second that we need. To put that in perspective, a football field is approximately 100 meters. So that would mean a small cell tower probably about every football field in the United States. So that's what depending on how far your houses are apart, maybe a more rural town, having two houses, Shrewsbury's a little more dense, maybe, or if you can imagine that. My neighborhood is like a quarter mile, so I can imagine needing one or two, just in my neighborhood. There is a viable alternative, so we know this isn't SELCO putting in 5G. We're happy with SELCO's direction in talking about deploying fiber and hard wiring, which is really the viable alternative. It's viable and safer alternative than this kind of ubiquitous wireless juggernaut that's put wireless everywhere so that every device is connected. You see a wireless small cell tower within eyesight. So wired internet has significant advantages over wireless in that it's more reliable, more secure for hacking, more energy efficient, faster, essentially radiation free. So we call it, like, instead of 5G, safe GPUs, right? So there is an alternative where you can be deploying fast internet connections without necessarily having. And one of the things I did, I also went on the Verizon website before this meeting, and on their website they had, you go to just 5G on Verizon, and it shows how 5G home networks work. And right at the top it says, first is a wireless node, a cell site in your neighborhood creates a 5G signal. So here they are right on the Verizon site for 5G saying it's in your neighborhood, and then that they were trying to say that that's going to provide Wi-Fi for everybody in the neighborhood, and that would go to their router. So that's just a little bit, a primer on that we think is a viable alternative. And then there's also smart meters, and smart meters, today we already have kind of AMI or automatic readers. So you can think of them as kind of like a simple step towards that. So we already, there's actually, Worcester had a smart meter pilot project that didn't go very well because the business case was a problem. So it's not only health concerns. When we went to present to the Board of Health, we also saw that there's a business case concerns, right? That they come in and say, this is going to, provide this benefit or that benefit. We're really going to look at it because it wasn't necessarily the case when they looked at it. Because they said, well, geez, you already put these automatic readers out there, so we drive a truck by, so it's not really that much savings. So they had to justify the cost. You're talking billions of dollars to replace things that may or may not be ready to be out of a flight of service. So we want to talk about that a little bit. And one of the things I think is relevant is if we look at the pipeline discussion. We talk about these like the big energy sector, right? Coming in with the pipeline at one time in Shrewsbury, and we kind of said, well, we don't have a choice, right? The town pretty much said, whatever the federal government says, our hands are tied. And, the Eversource and Spectra seem like, Enbridge, these big billion-dollar companies are coming in and saying, you have to do this. Otherwise, the residents get freezing in the winter. You're going to run out of gas, and you'll be freezing in the winter, so you need this pipeline, right? If you don't, then within 5 years, we're going to have to shut off gas to Shrewsbury's new customers. So they kind of made these big claims, which you'll probably hear in the telecom side is going to come and say, well, you need 5G, you need it, you need it, you need it, be behind. But we should be vigilant in trying to, trust but verify, really, because what ended up happening was, it's almost 5 years from the time they said that with the pipeline, and we're not out of gas yet. And actually what I did was right after that, after all that kind of rigmarole, I had the town manager reach out to Eversource and ask them, well, the pipeline's not coming, so we better be prepared for when the gas stops. And they replied and said, we're not planning on having any moratorium on gas for Shrewsbury. Shrewsbury's all set. We're working out. So in the end, it didn't, so I just want to put that because we have these big industries coming in, we've got to if we had just asked that question up front, what's your plan B on that case? So I think in this case, I think I speak with you guys as well. So,
have you read the regulation?
Which one?
The FCC's regulation on 5G small cell deployments.
I have not read the full one yet, but do you want us to finish first? Or you want us to,
sure, go ahead.
I just didn't know what you
Yeah,
wanted.
no, that'd be great.
So that's just in time to hand it off to CC, because we already presented at the Board of Health, and we did a big talk on health concerns of wireless, and there's a lot of evidence coming out, and that's available for everybody to see. So I wanted to focus a little bit on these today, as well as have a refresher, because a lot of times it's the first people are hearing about some of these health issues and some of the evidence behind that. So I think we're going to do a little recap on that, bring everybody up to speed, and talk about what other towns are doing and some alternatives.
All right, thank you, Brian. My name is CC Doucette from Ashland. And up until about 5 or 6 years ago, I didn't have any idea that there were any concerns for wireless technology. I used to run our local education foundation in Ashland, and we kept hearing about the 21st century classroom. and how our children were going to need to have all this new wonderful wireless equipment to succeed in. So we jumped in and did fundraisers. We got iPads, we got Chromebooks, we got smartboards, we got minis, we got Apple TVs, we got wireless infrastructure. And then I got together with a girlfriend at book group one night who's an electrical engineer, and she was reading a book called ZAT. And in that book, it was indicating that there are biological risks to all wireless technology. So I'm a technical and professional writer by trade, and so if you do a cursory search, is wireless safe, you will indeed find studies that show no harm. Well, I didn't know it at the time, but those are by and large industry-funded studies done under conditions that would deliberately show no evidence of harm. But once you get past that, you will get to things like the Bioinitiative Report, which is a compendium of thousands of studies from all over the world that show very clear evidence of harm. So this is just the cover page so you get a visual on what it looks like. And when we look at the table of contents, it says evidence to damage and sperm reproduction. And that's what got me on my feet, because I went in and I read the non-industry funded peer-reviewed published studies, and they showed that they've taken male human sperm and exposed it to a laptop with the antennas turned on. And it changed the DNA, which is a roadmap to grow a proper little one of these. It slowed the motility of the sperm, and it caused far fewer sperm to be viable in just 4 hours of exposure. And I had just bought my then 15-year-old daughter a laptop, and where is she using it but right on top of her reproductive organs. Subsequent to that, in 2012, when I was looking at this, Kaiser has put a large study that showed like a 3- or 4-fold increase in miscarriages for pregnant women who are using wireless devices around the fetus. So that's the sperm and reproduction. There's evidence that children are far more vulnerable. They're not just little people. Their very systems are still under construction. And if we look at this diagram, on the left, we're holding a cell phone up to an adult's head, and that's how far the radiation penetrates the brain. In the middle is a 10-year-old child, and on the right is a 5-year-old child. And you see the younger new person, it goes almost all the way across, absorbing through the brain of the child. So, and it goes on. I know we don't have much more time, but Dr. Martha Herbert founded the Autism Lab at Mass General, and she sees huge correlations between what we know scientifically happens with microwave radiation exposure, which is what this is. Our invisible wireless signals are going back and forth in a 2-way radio frequency microwave signals.
Just on your time.
Yeah.
I just would tell everyone here that I advise the commission members to watch the Board of Health. We made a very thorough half-hour plus meeting, and that is available on SMC's website. You can get a link and watch in its entirety.
Okay, great, and I hope everybody will. Most importantly today is that the U.S. National Toxicology Program last November concluded a $30 million study that they've been doing for decades. They went in expecting to prove that this technology that ran cell phones, which now runs that wireless router in every wireless device you have, they went in to prove that it was safe. And instead, they did an unprecedented 3-day peer review with international experts at the National Institutes for Health. And at the end of that, they put out their report that stated clear evidence of tumors, cancer, and DNA damage. And clear evidence is the highest public warning that we can give the public. But we never heard of that in our mainstream media. And that was one of my missing pieces when I started doing the deep dive on this. I'm like, if this is as bad as the science is showing, why don't we know who's got our backs on this? So then in 2015, Harvard's Law School Center for Ethics put out this 59-page report called Captured Agency, how the Federal Communications Commission is dominated by the industries it presumably regulates. And for some of you, that might be the same as big tobacco, big pharma, big chemical. It's the revolving door with our government agencies. And this is an excellent investigative report on how, like Ajit Pai, who's the FCC chairman now, was a senior lawyer for Verizon. Tom Wheeler, who stepped down when Ajit Pai came in, was the head of the CTIA, the Wireless Industry Association, and prior to that was the head of the Cable Association. So he actually did studies back in the 90s when the first oncologist made the connection that his patient died of these unusual tumors on the side of the head that happened to line up with their cell phone. They got on Larry King Live and reported that, and stock prices started plummeting. So Tom Wheeler said, well, that's horrible, let us do the research. And they hired George Carlin, who was a senior scientist. He put in place 200 scientists. They did the studies for years and concluded that this does look to be carcinogenic, and children are more vulnerable. Back in the 90s, and instead of invoking the precautionary principle, they got the Telecom Act. They lobbied hard, they wrote the law, and that's the measures of things that you're referring to, where you feel like your hands are tied at the municipal level. But you're not. So we have senior advisors to the World Health Organization saying we now know enough to move this from group 2B, possible human carcinogen, up to group 1, carcinogenic to humans. And as we know, public policy can take years to catch up to this, but our children don't have that kind of time to wait. So in Ashland, when our public schools started to look at this, we became the first public school district in the United States to even have this little sign hanging in all of our classrooms that says, turn those things off, turn off the Wi-Fi if you're not using it, because it's continually pulsing radiation at our staff and our children, whether there's any device trying to make a handshake or not. And certainly turn all those devices off when we're not using them. And in the manufacturer's fine print, it says right there, don't ever put it near your body or you make CBS illness from radiation exposure. And I think it was that legal fine print that got our schools to stand up, because the industry actually does not have insurance on this. Lloyd's of London, Swiss Re, and others have already walked away from this, so we have to be particularly vigilant when we're signing contracts with industry to look at that and say, okay, so the industry doesn't have insurance, so what does that do? Leave us as a town, leave us as a school system vulnerable to legal risk in addition to the biological risk. And with the schools, the New York Times did a series last fall on what the Silicon Valley executives are doing. And the Silicon Valley executives are sending their children to schools with no technology, right? That digital divide is not what we thought it was. They're just pushing that into our schools as fast as they can with their 21st century classroom. And they're actually having their nannies sign contracts that there will be no screens around their children. And then they did another one saying human contact is now a luxury good. Screens used to be for the elite, now avoiding them is a status symbol. So in Southborough, there was a federal lawsuit because children were becoming sick from the industrial strength mesh Wi-Fi networks. For the first time in American courts, they acknowledge there is biological harm at the non-thermal, non-ionizing level of radiation. And as far as 5G goes, oh, and I don't know if anybody caught the Chicago Tribune last month, but they went in and investigated. So if the manufacturer's fine print say keep this at a distance from your body, what happens when you use it like we all use it? It can exceed the FCC limits up to 11 times the radiation, which, by the way, were never safety tested. We have thousands of studies today showing it is not biologically safe. So 5G, we have small cell antennas going in all over Boston. We have Natick as a test city. We have Brockton as a test city. And as you guys may already be seeing, the industry is just pushing this out into our communities. And it literally does mean putting a cell tower inside our neighborhoods, like every 2 to 12 houses. There are people out in Sacramento, which is another test city, who woke up and within a month their children were crashing. After a couple weeks, their children were crashing, and they couldn't figure out what was going on, why they weren't getting better. They're like, what changed? And they went, what is that pole outside the girl's bedroom? And sure enough, they did the research. They moved the girls out of that bedroom. They created distance. They put shielding materials up. But they can't stay in that house because their kids are now sick. And that's what happens with the utility smart meters too. Water, gas, electric, solar, pulsing, microwave radiation, many times a minute, sometimes many times a second, through our homes without any regard for safety. Very common symptoms when people become sensitive to that are headaches, nosebleeds, nausea, dizziness, anxiety, insomnia is huge. And it's all because we're being bombarded with these invisible, silent pulses of microwave radiation. And we became the first library in the nation to put an acoustimeter on loan, which allows us to see and hear this invisible toxin. So you can borrow, well, residents of Ashland can borrow it, take it home, and just start gathering your data. What are our exposures? So in this room, if there were no signals, we wouldn't be getting this. If it was in the green, that's at the level where the science is still discovering what the biological risks are, because there has never been a safe level of microwave radiation in the scientific literature. When it goes into yellow, that's where those microwave sickness symptoms start coming up, right? And when we get into the red, we have literally thousands of studies all over the world, peer-reviewed published journals, showing this is linked to child and adult cancers. It's linked to infertility, and we are down 50% as a nation on our sperm count right now. And where are we all putting our wireless devices?
How much of that,
Autism.
how much of that is background radiation that you measure?
This is radio frequency radiation. So when you talk about background radiation, that we're like, I don't know, 10 to the 18th power higher than where we should be, right? This is all man-made radiation. So other countries are already pulling the stops on 5G. Brussels in Belgium has put a moratorium up. Parts of Rome, parts of Israel, in Geneva, where the World Health Organization is, right? They don't want it here. They don't want to be the guinea pigs for an industry that's forcing this stuff into our communities. Out near Silicon Valley, they've also put up a moratorium. San Mateo. At the federal level, Richard Blumenthal is a longtime Attorney General and prosecutor out of Connecticut. There was a new commissioner at the SEC, Brendan Carr, who was indicating that 5G is safe. He, Blumenthal, and Congresswoman Anna Eshoo sent a formal letter to the FCC saying, please send us the peer-reviewed published studies that you have showing this is harmless. And they had nothing. They had a Commerce Committee at the federal level. The industry was there. They said, please tell us how much you have invested in ensuring this is safe before it gets rolled out to the public. And they knew of no funding. And yet they're putting it inside our neighborhoods right now. There are others, Peter DeFazio on the Transportation Commission. There's efforts to do the OTARD rule revision. That's over-the-air radio waves. So if you live in a neighborhood where you don't have street poles where they can put these small cells up, they're gonna go to your neighbor and say, hey, we'll give you some money, can you put it on your roof? So even if you choose safe technology, there's no way you're gonna get away from this unless we stop it at the town level. And there's good news on that front too. As you said, the industry leads you to believe that you have no recourse. The town of Burlington, Massachusetts has been a national leader on this. They formed a small cell committee when Verizon came in with 7 applications and said, here's 7. But wait, it could turn out to be 14 or it could be 30, thinking the town would be really excited about all this free revenue for putting wireless communication facilities in the public access mode. But Burlington did their due diligence. They hired a lawyer who specializes in telecom law. And they put in place a small G policy that takes care of traditional things like it has to be ADA compliant. You can't put things in the middle of the sidewalk that are going to block passageway for somebody in a wheelchair. They said things like it has to blend in with the environment. Well, Verizon said some of those small cells can't be painted, so that was an iffy thing. And they said that if you put this in our community, you cannot just come in and drop and run like you're prone to doing. You have to come back every year and recertify that this technology is still viable in your community. And we don't have the expertise on staff to oversee that, so we, the town of Burlington, are going to assess the vendors a fee. And when the Verizon lawyer heard that last fall, they said, well, we don't want to set precedent for any kind of an annual research or a fee, so we withdraw our applications. So don't be conned into thinking you have no recourse. Massachusetts has 19 bills filed this session to address man-made radiation, public health, and the environment. 3 of those bills are up for public hearing tomorrow, and I've spent the last 2 days reading testimony upon testimony of Massachusetts residents who have already become ill when those utility smart meters went in, when the Wi-Fi came into their house, when they had cell towers show up outside of their house. We've also gotten testimony from doctors, from scientists. There's a state rep in Montana that wrote in for our bills because he's trying to get that FCC Telecom Act Section 704 overturned so that we have legal recourse for health and environmental. I was so honored to help with a bill in New Hampshire that has now passed into law to examine the health and environmental impacts of 5G. This is a first on that. Oregon just passed a bill into law that gets their Department of Public Health to look at the independent, non-industry funded science, advise the public, and especially advise our schools. So there are a lot of things happening out there that we just don't get in mainstream media because in big tobacco fashion, like Harvard's Captured Agency report tells us, if you can suppress evidence of harm, if you can come up with your own studies showing no harm, if you can get the laws written to support your corporate interests, and if you can keep selling the public your products with no safety information, they will keep buying it. So that's why we don't hear about it in mainstream media, but you don't have to look very far at all to get to the peer-reviewed published scientific studies. So don't listen to anybody's spin on this. Don't take my word for it. Get in there and start looking at this for yourself and stand up, and I am just so impressed to see everybody in here tonight because this is your town, these are your children. And we already are at epidemic proportions for anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation like we've never seen in our schools before. And we've done this to ourselves. So it's time to turn this around. We're having these conversations with the Department of Education. We testified with the Department of Public Utilities because that smart meter grid program with National Grid was, as Brian said, very fraudulent. They went way over budget, and then they wanted to turn around and make the ratepayers pay for it. They put these radiation transmitting devices on our homes with no informed consent, and in true environmental justice fashion, they go into a predominantly underprivileged community, put their toxic products in, and then say, hey, look, it worked right here. We're gonna roll it out across the state. And they're doing that in Rhode Island and New York, saying, look how great it was in Boston. Look how much it worked in Eastern. So we've got our work cut out for us, but we're not alone. There are people all over the world working on this. The European Academy of Environmental Medicine already has guidelines to train doctors on how to treat for microwave sicknesses. I was so honored this month to run policy panels at the first U.S. conference to give continuing medical education credits to doctors and nurses and firefighters and scientists, and you know, it's happening now. California already passed a cell phone fact sheet. It took a lawsuit to get it released because it was written in 2009 and the industry suppressed it. But this came out at the end of 2017, and we all should have heard about that, but once again, our media doesn't report on it. I have worked with the Department of Public Health here. They have 4 fact sheets on EMFs that should be given to the public immediately. We were told in 2016 they would be out in 3 months. It's been 3 years, and they have yet to see the light of day. The Globe reported on it in January, and a bunch of people called in to say, please release those fact sheets. And instead of releasing the actual scientific peer-reviewed studies, they threw up a cheap thing on our government radiation control website that basically says, oh, there's no clear evidence of harm. Meanwhile, we had given them the clear evidence as detailed by our own $30 million government study, so I can't tell you what's going on there. But as I got into looking at this, I got in way over my head, and I couldn't remember where I saw useful information. So as a tech writer, I created a very simple research repository that I invite every one of you, go in and pound around in it, use it as your launch point, to try and make it easy to understand. There's a page for smart meters. There's a page for 5G and the Internet of Things. I've done a page for municipal leaders to try and see it from your perspective. What are you up against? How can we help you get through that and get to safe technology? So the message is not no technology, it's safe technology. And we knew how to do that 10 years ago. You just run it through an Ethernet cable to the premises. And that's what the industry promised us. They were going to bring faster speeds to the premises, and then when wireless became so highly affordable for them and profitable, we took a left turn and started letting them put up wireless nodes all over the place. So fine, run the fiber or the cable backbone through the street, but bring it right up to the building, which is where you can hook inside your house to an Ethernet cable. And then all you need are little adapters. You can use a Thunderbolt adapter to hardwire your MacBook, right? You can use a Lightning adapter, the RJ45, to actually hardwire an iPhone. And kids don't use the phone anymore anyway. They're just texting and going online. You can do all that through a hardwired connector to the back of your neck. It's not rocket science, but we've been sold on all Wi-Fi all the time. There are other adapters. Check out the Pluggables website or others, and you can find them for most devices, but don't buy anything until you've tested it. So the message tonight is not no technology, right? The Mediterranean country of Cyprus has already put out a 16-point fact sheet. You guys could take that in your town and get it out to the public and say, here's what one country's already doing. Perhaps most appropriate for tonight's conversation is this policy book called Reinventing Wireless. It outlines all the problems with wireless that Brian told us, not only the health, but the speed. Wi-Fi is pretty crummy technology if we're honest with ourselves. It falls apart all the time, it's slow, it's not safe, your data's flying around up there. It's a huge security risk because it can be hacked and taken down by somebody with like a $20 application at the curb. So there are, and your property values. Cell towers go up, real estate studies show us property values drop 20%, and that's your tax revenue base, right? So we gotta be careful.
Is that happening in Boston to the property values? The property values are going, because they're deploying these
They
5G
are.
small cells everywhere. So are those property values going down?
I would guess it's probably too soon to have any statistics around that yet, but as a nation, that's what happens when somebody wants to sell a house that's now got a cell tower on it. But listen, there are great ways to learn about this. I've had the privilege of building a nonprofit out of Europe with some of the world's leading scientists and doctors. It's called wirelesseducation.org, and we have distilled this into a half-an-hour course. There's one for schools and families, there's one for the workplace. We can literally train everybody in a half an hour. It's not rocket science, but we need the privilege of having the facts. And there's an excellent film in Shrewsbury Public Library. It was actually the first to pre-screen this back in 2017 before it was released to the public. It's called Generation Zapped. And you will hear directly from world-leading scientists and doctors and public health experts on why this is a huge concern and why we should all be putting this at the top of our priorities on our very busy lives, because I didn't see this coming either, and I would really rather not be doing meetings like this. But once you know, how can you not get out there and start protecting our children and our communities? So, there's also, for those of you with child age or school-age children or grandchildren, we had this incredible forum right here at the Shrewsbury Public Library this spring. Dr. Martha Herbert she's a Harvard pediatric neurologist who started that autism lab at Mass General. She came and told us all the neurotoxicity and other things that this is doing to us. We had Dr. David Carpenter, who has been a World Health Organization advisor. We had Theodore Storado from the Environmental Health Trust. We had Dr. Ron Melnick, who designed that $30 million U.S. government study. He's retired now and at liberty to speak the truth. So this is there. All of our schools should be tuning into this, and we should not have started another school year with all these wireless access points just bombarding our children with toxic radiation. Talk to your school nurses. Headaches, nosebleeds, nausea, dizziness. They're asking parents for more tissues for nosebleeds and barfing in the classroom than they have ever needed in their classroom. So this is happening on our time right now. And you guys have an incredible opportunity to start getting ahead of it and protecting your community. Thank you.
Any comments?
No, I have questions, but I would let you guys.
So I go home and I shut off my router,
Yes.
and I take your machine, I turn it on, and it still maxes out because 7 other neighbors have routers and they're all jammed. So you're proposing that we set some standard in the town that you have to have emissions checked on every house in town?
That would be lovely if you can swing it, but.
Well, you throw that in this proposal, it'll never get elected, it'll never get voted.
I know.
But
Start
those
where
are
you
part of the issues that, you know.
It is. Start where you are and just start thinking, what can I control? Probably the most important thing you can do tonight is get good sleep. Because if we don't get good sleep, our body can't properly cell repair and regenerate.
I think that's a fair gateway, segue into, what is it that you want us to do?
Hardwiring. Promote
Okay, so-
hardwiring.
But that's
and
what we
fight
do.
as hard as you, I know, cable's
We
great,
love
right?
hardwire. I
But
would
don't
As a matter of fact, we prefer that
Wireless
Verizon doesn't come in with 5G.
I
We
know.
love hardwire.
Yeah.
Because right now the FCC
That's
says
our-
we can't stop them.
That's our
But-
core
Get
Get
business.
creative. I would suggest you give Jim Tigas a call in Burlington. He is a selectman there who headed up the small cell.
I think we've talked with
committee.
Burlington.
Mike Lawson from Concord has been in touch recently. There are towns all over Massachusetts. You guys should not take this sitting down. You
Yeah,
should
we
be
know.
using your influence to get in there and make the FCC change those regulations.
Like,
Just
Yeah,
a
wait,
couple,
wait.
a couple comments on the three issues that you brought up. We do, in 2014, we stopped selling Wi-Fi. And that was primarily because there were too many Wi-Fi, or we would stop servicing it because customers were all buying their own Wi-Fi routers and then asking us for help, and we couldn't manage 25 different brands of Wi-Fi. But the demand for Wi-Fi became so strong, and the help desk got so many calls, that we studied the issue, and we came up with a very state-of-the-art Wi-Fi router that's built by a company called Calix. It's very powerful in terms of its functionality, and there is features in there that allow the customer portal to set certain controls. They can control what hours their children can use it. It can be turned up. You can turn it on and off through an on-off switch for both the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz signals. So our product allows for the customer to take control of his cell phone, her home, and
Right,
how.
but I think what they need is education, because of that, so, in my case, I didn't have anybody I could talk to for a couple of years when I was doing a deep dive on this. Once it finally sunk in that I need to protect my family, I replaced the decked cordless phones, because that's like having my own cell tower. I hardwired everything in my home, but then I was still getting all this radiation from my triple play box, right? So I called up, it was Verizon for us at the time, and said, how do we get rid of that signal, because we're choosing the faster, safer hardwire? They said, sit down at your computer, and I went, really? And they said, yeah. So I sit down at my computer, it gives me the IP address for that box that they put in my home, and they gave me login credentials, and then I just had to go into wireless settings, and as you said, there was the 2.4 gigahertz and then the 5 gigahertz antenna, and I just had to go off, apply. And then I went down to my utility closet where our box was, and after a couple of minutes, it disappeared. But then we switched to Comcast, because my husband saw a better deal. And so he said, we'd like to take you up on your offer, but my wife's gonna wanna be really clear that there's no radio frequency. We said, no problem, we got that. So the guy comes in, the tech comes in, replaces our box from Verizon with the Comcast box. When he says he's all done, I go down with my measurement device, and it's off the charts. And I said, you got the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz, right? And he said, yeah, those are off. And I said, and I have heard that Comcast, and I don't know if others are doing that, they're putting public hotspots on your home's box to throw signal all the way out to the street so others can hook in, which by the way is using your electricity too, so it's pretty unconscionable. He says, well, I actually turned off the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz hotspot. And I said, so why is this going off the charts? And he said, I don't know. And he spent the better part of the day trying to figure it out. His help desk got nowhere. He said, I'm coming back tomorrow with my supervisor. Meanwhile, that night I contacted a colleague in Silicon Valley who had mentioned that fifth antenna, and I didn't know what it was. Turns out that box we got was already outfitted with an antenna for, can anybody guess?
Public Wi-Fi.
No, that was the hotspots. This was for the home security system, which we don't even have a wireless home security system, but all 5 of those antennas were blaring at my family. Constantly, billions of cycles a second, on and on and on and on and on. Looking for handshaking.
Okay, so
So on the Wi-Fi, we do have that on-off switch for 2, 4, and 5.
Are those
I
the
can't-
only antennas you have?
No, I think the whole industry is going towards public, all routers are being built with public Wi-Fi signals, and
Yeah,
then
so
we
they-
don't have the ability to turn that off.
Well, I
It's
think
on
we
it.
need to take it back to our engineers and start having a safety conversation, and you guys can be leaders. You don't have to be followers. Get out there and build the stuff that's not regulated. This is not regulated. You can create safe technology, and you can come out ahead of the pack and educate your customers on it.
For 1,000 customers, it would be very expensive for us to hire engineers to build that type of product. But I know what you're
Probably
saying.
do it in a patch upgrade, maybe, who knows, ask them.
Yeah,
See
what-
if they
I
can
mean,
just
that-
do an upgrade
okay, well,
and
we've got,
turn off those antennas.
the time we had expended,
Yeah.
we're already 20 minutes over. Michael has some other comments about
Okay.
what's.
Yeah, no, in terms of the AMI meters, we've looked into this, and we are about to sign a contract to deploy the AMR meters. We currently have AMR meters, and the AMI meter, in terms of what it will transmit, will be significantly less than the AMR. So it's going in the right direction.
It is, but the bottom line is there's no safe level of radio frequency radiation in the scientific literature. And the companies have told us that those things pulse a couple times a day. You get out there with a meter and you will see very differently. And that pulses through our homes. So now you're gonna be proposing electric, 1 meter, gas, another
With
meter,
my
water,
house.
another meter. But that's what the town is gonna wind up doing, right? And solar. You have to have a smart meter to have a solar system in today's world, right?
You have to have a different type of meter, but it's not, is it a smart
I've
meter?
actually been working with some of the
But
solar
the
companies.
solar itself, inverters connected to the solar array,
Actually,
they all have
I've gotten a couple of the solar companies to say in a contract that we will install this and we will disable the wireless signals and we will hardwire them to your home. Now we need to address the electricity that may come in with that, but.
It's the same with
it's doable.
batteries.
Yeah.
Batteries have EMF for car chargers in the home. Hybrid vehicles have more EMFs than gas-powered
And that
vehicles, so.
doesn't make it any safer,
Yeah.
that just means the innovation has caught on and they're pushing it out into the market with no safety testing. So let's just start where we are.
So I would say that, these meters are gonna pulse probably 83 seconds on a day that has, how many seconds? 86,400 seconds a day. They'll pulse. Right now, they're pulsing between every 7 and 30 seconds. So the frequency at which this upgrade, which they'll pulse, will be significantly reduced. It may not meet your standard, but it's a vast.
Well, why does it have to do that? If they only need to get our reading once a month, why isn't it pulsing once a month?
Because every day people move in and move out, and it has to do with reads.
But can't they just turn it on, turn it off, and somebody changes it?
I don't-
But these are the questions, I mean, these are great thoughts, and these are the questions we need to be asking, because they have come in full tilt, everything, all the time.
But they also, in a green world, you're gonna want us to
No.
monitor peak electrical demand. And so you're gonna run into a problem where, on the one
Hardwired.
hand, you can hardwire it perhaps, but you're gonna have to still have the ability to bring it, bring it in, so.
Run it in through an Ethernet cable. Run it to your router. You can gather your data that way. You don't need radiation. And by the way, this is another dirty
Brings more
little
to you.
secret, is that wireless systems consume about 10 times more energy than hardwired systems. So when they talk about the green new economy, we presented it to Ed Markey when he did the town hall in Framingham. And when I handed him this book on reinventing wires, he said, oh yeah, I commissioned a study 20 years ago that found out this was a co-carcinogen. So they have known about this and they still let it go through. So I will leave you guys with the hard
Oh,
copy
sure.
of reinventing wires.
I would just say on the 5G, while I appreciate what you say, the FCC still has a very strict regulation.
But they're
And yes,
starting to
we're in the
have cracks
process.
in their armor.
Well, it's been appealed to the Ninth Circuit Court, as you know, in
Right, and
California.
that won.
And hasn't won yet, no.
No.
No, it hasn't been heard.
Okay, one of them in the Supreme
Yeah.
Court out in
No,
California
it has
was
not been
heard
heard.
to allow towns to have the autonomy to say,
No,
yeah.
we can't do that. We've hired Washington attorneys, we've hired high-cost Boston attorneys to look at this for us.
Something came out about a month ago.
No, it's not.
We know about that one.
Yeah,
Because
Well, I'll send
we
you
are
what
on
you're
top of
saying.
that
5G.
issue,
Yeah.
because my fear is, we like the wired line,
Right.
but guess what? We get a lot of complaints from people or statements that you're a monopoly and you are creating barriers to entry. The last thing in the world I want to do is come across that SELCO is an obstructionist to 5G so that it can protect its own asset. I can't live in that world. We can't have our citizens saying that I and SELCO Commission is creating barriers to entry, especially when the regulation is so
But I think if you get back and educate
strong.
your population, you can stem those conversations by teaching them what safe technology looks like.
Oh, I
Right?
don't-
All they're hearing is the spin from the industry. I want an autonomous
Yeah, no.
vehicle, right? An autonomous vehicle can only go as far as the next small cell tower. That's why they have to be everywhere, right? What good is a vehicle if you can't drive outside of Boston?
So I look at
They're putting
5G
everywhere.
as competition for our business.
Right?
But
Take 'em down.
I can't, no, we are not in that, we are a nonprofit.
Then do the next best thing.
We're not anti-competitive, we can't be that way.
Then start working with your engineers on safety.
If that be the case, we should get out of the business.
I mean, I think
Use your
It's
voices.
when we step aside,
Yeah.
the void, leave it by Verizon.
I mean, if I could, I just wanted to answer that, like, from a citizen's point of view, if you don't mind. I know you guys asked, like, what's the ask, right? So CC has all this great information.
That is the question.
Yeah, I mean, it's taken years for us to come to this, and I know, like, what happened was when I learned about this, I took the first step to say, well, let's go to Beals, the building Beal, right? We have all this information. I just wanted to present it to the Beals building committee to say, just hear this information, and there's a lot of concerned citizens, let's have a conversation about it. And they denied that request. They said, we don't want it, that we're not allowing you to present to the Beal building committee.
So this is
So
a
we
K
went
through 4 school,
K
right?
through 4 school. So I went to the Board of Health, and they allowed us to present, and that's why I'm thankful for the SELCO Commission doing the same as well. And it might just be, I mean, the Beal Building Committee has a lot on their hands, they have a short amount of time, they've got architects there, they've got big money, they're, budgets to build, so I understand that they're short on time, but what I'd like to ask here is that it doesn't just not get discussed, or it doesn't, in the past, like, if we look at the pipeline, one of the things we did with the pipeline, we said, hey, we had 100 plus citizens that are concerned about the pipeline. And they said, well, there's nothing we can do, it's, federally driven and there's nothing we can do. So it never became another topic for any of the boards, other than what we brought as citizens forward. So I'm really trying to see if we can keep it as
I don't think they're
as
in
an
the
item
same
that-
legal framework, the two issues.
And maybe that's so, and that's why, I'm just trying to think if there's a lot of detail. I mean, CC presented, and not even everything, presented so much detail tonight, that would be a shame if it just wasn't on old business. And what, you didn't pick up smart meters and say, let's look at happening district, Michael's bringing back information already based on some of these court cases.
Yeah, we would be reducing the RF by implementing smart meters.
Maybe, but you have to, if we look at the project, we have to say, well, how much it's gonna cost? $4 million. Like, let's look at that project. If, like, what Cece's saying is that it's still, let's measure that, like, trust but verify. Let's get a
Yes,
meter
so we
and
do that.
measure this.
But when you do that, Brian, you have to look at the cost in what's the incremental cost between a standard meter AMR and the AMI meter. And that, because you have to replace the meters, they have a shelf life. So some of our meters are coming up on.
Are there any analog meters?
No.
There's no
And we've
manufacturing
asked,
analog meter.
Yeah.
we asked our consultant to find us an analog meter for those who may want to opt out of AMI, and they have yet to find.
They're available, we can show you where to get them. But the analog meter is the only safe meter. Even with the AMI meters, where
Oh,
they're still
yeah.
doing drive-bys in the neighborhood to get the reading, those are pulsing 24/7. And with any digital signal, there's an added risk that signal can hop on the wires and the pipes of your home and virtually create like an antenna on your home. So we've just done a cursory look at this, but there is far more concern here than meets the eye. And when you talk about economics, what are you going to do about the economics of the health of your population? We've already got children falling apart like we have never seen before.
Can you connect that to a
Yeah.
study
Is
that
there a
talks, you said that the
Absolutely.
throwing up in the nosebleeds and all
Did
that?
you-
Are
Yeah.
there direct connections to it?
Yeah,
There
I teach
are.
at the high school.
This-
And the
this
American,
study-
are you familiar with the American Cancer Society's statement on it?
Yeah, they said that NTP study is paradigm shifting good science.
I haven't seen that in any
You
of
can
their
send me that.
literature. I'd love to
We
see
can
that.
see, we can show
Because
you.
on their website, it says inconclusive.
Go in and
Yeah.
look to see.
For humans.
And
Go in
NIH
and look to
too.
see where the funding comes from.
Yeah.
A lot of those groups are heavily funded by the industry. So you gotta know what questions to ask and where to look, and always come back to the peer-reviewed, published, independent science, not somebody's.
I hear what you're saying, but I always look at the American Cancer Society as a fairly independent,
But go look
objective
again,
body.
they're not that incredible.
Okay.
I'd like to say, as Christian, I very much appreciate that you came to and the group here. It certainly opened my eyes to the conversation and to learn more about it. I think that when we're discussing products, we're hearing lots of voices. You're one voice. And some of the voices are, I need more Wi-Fi, I need better speed, I need this, I need that. So I think we always have to balance all of them, all those voices, and decide how we run our business. And I'm glad that you guys came to include that fact.
And we talked earlier, with Brian, about, instead of coming to our committees, what you really need to do is potentially go to SMIC. I mean, you pay, if you have cable in your house, some of your money goes directly to the town to support SMC, your media channels that are free. And you can make your whole show, and you can do as long as you want.
Yeah, you can do an
And
entire-
do it
in a lot of
in
communities,
each of the areas, and then it'll play 24/7 on TV, as far as education goes.
Yeah, I do think it's about educating community.
It
I mean,
is.
we certainly opened our eyes, but unless our community is really demanding and doing that, those are real changes that are not competitive with the
right.
business. And, if we don't compete, we become Verizon, we become Comcast, and now you're dealing with a national company, so it's a tough balance that you're
Yeah,
describing.
we're
It's
joining
not
the
as easy as it
conversation at a really good point in time, because the wheels are starting to come off the bus. When that Chicago Tribune article came out last month, that showed that holding a cell phone up to your head increases the radiation like 11-fold on what the FCC guidelines are.
Yeah,
There's already class
We
action
reached a point where we
lawsuits
need to
going
move
on.
on. I don't mean to cut you off.
No,
It's
no,
great
we
stuff.
appreciate the
And,
time.
I do think you should do a,
TV show.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
They're wonderful.
Yeah, we've done them in Northborough, we've done them in Pepperell, we've done them in Ashland.
It'll run, and you have a good community, and.
That's right. And I think there's an appetite to do another screening of Generations Act in the community, which won Best Documentary at the Decent
October
Film
23rd.
Festival, it's part of the United Nations Film Festival.
It's October 23rd.
So October
And you've
23rd
got-
at the library.
And you'd be amazed at how many people watch it 3 in the morning that don't have anything else to do. All of a
Right.
sudden they fall on it. Well, I didn't watch this before, but all of a
Yeah,
sudden
we
they.
can send you the
Yeah, but they
link.
might start
Yeah, we'll send you,
sleeping
we can tell you
at
exactly how many TVs are watching it at any time.
You know what? Grab those statistics right now,
Yeah.
and as we educate your community, let's see who's
Well,
sleeping through the night.
you could,
I mean, there's
you can go on, you can go
pleasure.
on right now to SMC, because all the shows are on YouTube, and it'll see how many views you have. And it'll tell you right how many times it's been viewed.
No,
It just gives you an
seriously,
idea. But
people who turn this
this is-
stuff off actually find that they start sleeping through the night again. Very often, children's behavior issues start going down when they're not, central nervous system's not getting
I just
jacked.
worry that's all anecdotal and
Oh,
it's
no,
hard
no,
to.
no. And you would think that because you've never been privy to the science. There are literally thousands of studies, and when you go Here, I'll leave everybody with my business card. On the back of it is my research
You provide the Board of
repository.
Health with the list, right?
Yeah.
Should they get it?
Yeah, so if I can just get the right address and,
We can send you what we sent the Board of
so
Health.
this is
and
the little
studies.
nonprofit where literally
send
we've
it
got
to
the
me, Brian, I'll
training
forward
built.
it.
We can train anybody in a half an hour.
So my son lives in Sutton, and they're talking about putting a cell tower behind his house in the condo section, and he's just ballistic.
He should be.
What can we do to stop him?
Get his neighbors educated and show up like you've shown up to them. Right, and half hour, anybody can go get level set with the facts and then sit down and have an intellectual conversation about what to do, so use the
I looked at
resources.
the Navigate.
Yeah.
Silicon Navigate, but the focus of the article wasn't at all what you kind of implied. The focus of the article was addiction to screens.
Right.
And it didn't mention at all anything about radiation.
But they
So-
know, but that is like their little thing, oh, we'll give them this, we'll talk about
But
the
I
blue
worry-
light in the media.
But I worry it discredits me for you a little bit, because I worry that when you make statements, when you talk about that Navigate article, it didn't sink at all when I read it. And now I'm like, well, wish there was other things in there if I actually read the article.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do a little
Yeah.
study there.
Yeah.
But I would eliminate the Navigate one, because I read it.
Well, no,
Has
what I
nothing
said
to
is
do
that they're
with-
saying they don't want screens around their children, they don't want
because of the
technology
addic-
around their
Because of the
children.
addictive nature of it, nothing to do with radiation.
Did you know that that radiation hits the same receptors in the brain?
That's not the focus of the article,
No.
it's much more.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair, that's fair, but go on the back of my business card, that's where my research repository is, and you can actually read the science.
Yeah.
And then reach out with any questions, I'm right here in Ashland.
Sorry. Well, folks, we thank you for, we're not trying to kick you out if you want to hang around and
Yeah, it's really-
listen to the elections and
We'd love to have you.
find out what you. Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you very
but-
much.
Pleasure
Everyone
to
check out
see you.
yourself.
Pleasure to have you.
Thank you for coming. Thanks,
Thanks,
appreciate
guys.
it. Appreciate
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
presenting.
This whole thing is.
Yeah, or you can just Google me.